From the heart of the city too busy to hate. A progressive voice making too much sense for corporate media's comfort. This is The Ron Show, where we the people come first. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hello, and thank you for listening. Whether it's on Georgia Now, weekdays 4 to 6 p.m., the replay, the rerun, 8 to 10 a.m., the following morning on Georgia Now, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. It is the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. At least it still is, last I checked. And in this presidency, I'm not sure that this holiday will survive this presidency, but we'll pick up on that again at some other point in time if that ever has to be addressed. Nonetheless, there are commemorations happening throughout not just the city of Atlanta, the state of Georgia, and throughout the country as well. Again, as long as we're still allowed to do that. I want to start, however, with a conversation. A former House representative. She is the CEO of Morgan Enterprises, also the founder for the Center for Strong Public Schools, frequent pundit on Fox 5 WAGA Television's The Georgia Gang. Alicia Thomas Searcy comes to the show today, where actually she and her husband Carlos are en route. You had mentioned that your husband Carlos is off to speak at an event in Swainsboro, Georgia, not far from where I grew up in Harlem, Georgia. So I appreciate you giving us some time today. My pleasure, and happy King Celebration Day. So you, having worked in politics and still keeping your toe in the water a little bit, frequent punditry. I saw you yesterday on Fox 5's The Georgia Gang. Speak to me about the state of where this nation is when it comes to civil rights. I think this is an important day to have this conversation. Just weeks ago, us white folks were told that we don't have to apologize for being white anymore. And what a relief that was, because I was spending so much time apologizing for being white. But on the real, and not trying to be churlish about this, Dr. King's vision seems distant today, and not just chronologically, but I want to let you either give me the glass half full or glass half empty perspective from your point of view. Yeah, I appreciate that opening, because you're right. When you think about where we are as a country, the president that we have, and the fact that we're celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. King, and, you know, the saying is it's a day on, not a day off. I do have a half full perspective, because what it really means is we just need to be not just reminded of his life and legacy, but we have to actually do the things that he has prolifically, tried to get us to do. I'm reminded this morning, my husband went on to the Georgia State Trooper page, and as they should, the GSP was honoring, the King holiday. Mm-hmm. And someone put in the comments, Happy James Earl Ray Day. Oh, my God. Really? In the Georgia State Patrol page, of all places? Yes. I mean, just the level of boldness that exists right now. Yeah. I wasn't alive in the 50s and 60s, but I could imagine this is the kind of boldness that existed then, mm-hmm. Where people can say and do almost anything. And we have a president, I think, who has opened the door for that. And some would argue that it happened. The boldness started probably around the time that President Obama was elected. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, white people, there are some who didn't like that, didn't, appreciate the fact that I think at the time we believed that we actually focused, as Dr. King would say, on someone's character, the content of their character, and not the color of their skin, and elected the person that this country believed was best for who we wanted to be and who we sought to be as a country, and the things that Dr. King talked about. But there are some folks who didn't like that. And I think it at the time was a small group of people, and now it has increased because, it's almost celebrated to be ugly, to be nasty, to be racist. And so it's frustrating. Every time you turn on the television, if you scroll social media, you can find yourself very angry. If you see what's happening in Minnesota, it can enrage you. But I think we have to remind ourselves that we have work to do. And one of the things that Dr. King also talked about is, particularly the folks in the middle, those moderates, you have to make sure that you're not silent, because the silence of the enemy, right, is just as bad as some of the
the opposition. And so we just have work to do. It's a reminder. And I think days like this, whether it's a King holiday, whether it's those moments that we read those posts, I try to stay off of the Georgia Gang page because the ugliness that comes to me there, sometimes I hear about it or I may get a tag. And so unfortunately, I end up seeing it. It's just amazing to me. But I refuse to allow the ugliness, the racist, what I believe is a small portion of this country, small portion of this state, control how I see the world, how I see myself or my place in this country.
I want to go back to something you said about this nation and its electing a Barack Obama for seeing ourselves as the country that we believed ourselves to be or ought to be. Do you believe that pendulum sort of swung to where that there is a large portion of this country that sees itself just like the sort of character that Donald Trump is and the sort of vitriol that he spews? That to me is alarming.
It is. I don't think it's the majority, but I think it's a significant number of people.
Yeah.
And that's the part that makes you really sad and a little bit scared, because literally people are dying, are being killed. You see some of these plots, not of people from other parts of the world, but Americans who have that much hatred. Look at what's happening in the Jewish community around this country. And so, yes, the hatred exists. I don't think it's the majority of people, but it's a significant number, and we all need to be concerned about it. We all need to sit at kitchen tables where we hear the rhetoric and stand up and speak out and fight against it. It's when you allow conversations to be had around you and you don't say anything, when you see it on social media and you don't speak up, people think that it's okay. And we cannot allow them to make us afraid or make us silent. But as I said, I refuse to allow that to be the norm. I do think it's growing, and so we should be concerned about that. Obviously, when you look at, I don't know if the FBI continues to keep these numbers. They used to under a different administration. But you see that hate groups are growing. The number of incidents are growing across the country. Again, reminiscent of the 50s and 60s. And we thought that we had overcome that. And I think there was a period that we did. But we are returning to that, and it can get just as bad or even worse if we don't do something about it.
I'm like you. I don't want to believe that 77 million Americans necessarily align themselves with this white nationalist ideology, this emboldened white nationalist ideology that even the vice president now has fully embraced publicly, despite having once thought of Trump as a vulgar, vile, divider and I don't want to believe, but I do believe that those 77 million, a good portion of them, maybe even the majority, were okay with it because it sought to advance their ideological views, and they were willing to overlook that part. And that to me is every bit as concerning. It's why for a lot of the time that we've followed on this show, the exploits of Jeff Duncan from being the outcast Republican to being the independent to being the Democrat, that also concerns me because, and again, if Jeff becomes the nominee here in the state of Georgia, great, I'm fully behind him. But what bothers me is that I'd like to see more folks in the Republican Party fixing the Republican Party so that we can all get, I feel like this is a fire of their own making in their own yard, and it's advanced to our yard now, and they come over to our yard to put out the fire in our yard instead of dealing with where it started.
I love that analogy, and I would agree with you. I think about Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, was certainly a part of the rhetoric, certainly a part of the misinformation campaigns, and, helped to light the fire of a lot of these people.
She had the gas can.
Yes. And so now that she has been burned by the very people that she once supported, and if I wasn't on a public platform, I would use different language. Now all of a sudden, she is thinking about leaving the Republican Party. She lacked the courage to stay in her own congressional seat and deal with the fire that she started. And so you're right. I would agree with you 100%. And I'll go back just for a second about something you said regarding the 70 million. again, I would agree that it's not 70 million people, I think, who believe in the vitriol and the ugliness and the hatred and the racism and this white nationalism. I don't believe that 70 million people believe that.
Right.
I think that many of them, as we know, are uneducated voters who, were thinking that they were looking out for their own interest. When Trump talked about getting rid of the quote unquote illegals, they didn't think he was talking about anything that would affect them.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't believe that it would impact their pocketbooks in any way. They foolishly believed that on day one he was actually going to reduce the prices of eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately they were not informed, and sometimes voters vote against their own interests because they don't understand the big picture.
Yeah.
And so I think they're now feeling remorseful. I think a number of Republicans who kind of held their noses and voted for him regret it, and privately they talk and wish that they would do more. But you know what? There are a lot of consequences that come when you speak against Donald J. Trump within the Republican Party and in this country. And I know it because I have friends who are Republicans, and it's sad to see how quiet and silenced they are because they know how great the consequences are to speak against Donald Trump. Look at, again, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Look at what's happening to her.
Yeah.
And in no way do I think it's right to threaten people, for folks to be afraid. That is absolutely not the way. But this is the world that they have created. And she is now on the other end of that. And it doesn't feel good, does it? And so we need to be careful about allowing, whichever party to be taken over and to not speak up. And so I think you're right. The Republicans have a big job to do. The question is, do they have the guts to do it? And I would argue that in this season, they don't. Because, again, the consequences are too great. It's almost like, you want to be in the cool kids club. And, it's almost cool now to say Happy James Earl Ray Day. And no one does anything about it on a state agency website.
Well,
and so hopefully as soon as they find out, they will stop it. But what if they don't?
What I can't help but notice, too, is that I tell people all the time, we're all frogs in the same pot. And instead of punching down at the next subset that is marginalized, like I see this happening. I've been having this back and forth with some folks who are in the African American community, for example, who want to punch down on trans people. And I'm like, it's 2026. Why are we still having this conversation? What does the question of who can get pregnant have to do with the cost of eggs, the cost of milk at the grocery store, our languishing jobs market, the fact that we're about to potentially, leave NATO because of Greenland that was not on anybody's radar. What does we've got to stop this whole punching down thing. And that to me seems to be at the crux of why we can't be united as the 99% that's all being suppressed by the 1% or the 95% and the 5%.
Yeah, I agree. I think you can put a number of groups in that category, right?
Right.
Whether it's immigrants, whether it's poor people, I think that's human nature where you want to punch down to make yourself look better, or you think that it doesn't apply to you, so you allow the us versus them. And I think even when it comes to issues related to the trans community, certainly, the trans community deserves to have a voice. But I would argue this was not a political issue that was even something on people's radars.
Nope.
It was something that Republicans decided to use, again, to further divide people.
Yep.
And Democrats have to do a better job of clearly articulating what do we actually care about. And I think we're getting to that point. We've now named affordability as the issue, and Republicans, it's comical to me to watch them now adopt the language, even though they're the ones in control and they're doing absolutely nothing to address affordability. But now it's their issue, too. And so I think I would consider that to be a win for Democrats, that we've been messaging on that that we're speaking to the issues that people care about, including the folks who wrongly voted for Donald Trump, thinking that they were voting for their own interests. I think talking about affordability, addressing the fact that folks are paying 30% more for their health care now because of the end of the subsidies, talking about the price of eggs and the price of, groceries and childcare, things that really matter, things that, frankly, Democrats have always been the better party on because we actually care. It's not a political issue. It's not, something that we're using to punch down. This is something that we care about because those are our values, that we care about the least of these. We care about, and we are compassionate in terms of our policies. And so I believe that we're starting to win because we're moving back to caring about all people, regardless of which category they identify with.
We're with Alicia Thomas-Searcy, former state representative, CEO Morgan Enterprises, founder of the Center for Strong Public Schools, pundit on Fox 5 WAGA TV's The Georgia Gang. More of that conversation when we return on Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn and Review Podcast. This is The Ron Show. We're with Alicia Thomas-Searcy, former state representative at the Georgia House of Representatives, also CEO at Morgan Enterprises, frequent pundit on Fox 5 WAGA TV's The Georgia Gang. I want to get back to discussing diversity, equity, inclusion, for example. It's the Dr. King holiday, and diversity, equity, inclusion have become demonized terms for a lot of folks on the political right. And again, we've seen since Donald Trump's being sworn back in, Vice President J.D. Vance with his emboldened rhetoric at a Talking Points USA summit recently, and thinking of Charlie Kirk, his fears of hopping on a plane if somebody's black. Me personally, I feel like if I'm hopping on a plane and I've got two black pilots in the cockpit, I know they had to work 5 times as hard to get where they are, so I feel a lot more comfortable. But that's just me. But I wanted to speak a little bit to how diversity, equity, and inclusion was actually good for this country and good for business, and how we've taken a 5-fold step backwards on that. And you've got companies even scrambling to reterm the ideology so that it's hidden and not in plain sight for activists in basements to go and attack them. How do we change the narrative on that as well? Because I hear a lot of narrative changing that needs to be done on the Democratic side, and I think this is one that the Democrats are still a little weak on verbiage-wise.
It's a great question. I think first we have to define what is diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think even on the Democratic side, there's a lack of information. I think we have to recognize first and foremost that all of us are equal. Right? Let's start there.
Yeah.
Some of us don't believe that, even on the Democratic side. And so we have to start there, that we are all equal. And the purpose of diversity, equity, and inclusion is acknowledging that because white men have been in control in this country for a very long time, in the world, I would argue, we recognize that because we are all equal, the playing field has not been equal. And so therefore you want diversity, not just diversity in terms of color. You want diversity of thought, diversity of gender, diversity of life experiences, recognizing that because I grew up in Miami, Florida, and you grew up in Harlem, Georgia, we probably have some different life experiences that are equally valuable to make decisions, whether it's in business or agriculture or education or whatever it is that we're doing. Equity recognizes that because the playing field has not been leveled, that we need to create opportunities and systems so that we can level that playing field, so that opportunity is available for all. And inclusion is making sure that everybody has a seat at the table, that we're thoughtful about, let me see, if I'm looking around the room and everybody in here is a Black woman, maybe I need to have some Black men. Maybe I need to have some white people. Maybe I need to have white women. Maybe I need to have Latinos. Maybe I need to have PI people there. Maybe I need to have people with different abilities, right? We need to be inclusive because we recognize that everybody's experiences matters. And so first we've got to define and understand what that means. What it does not mean is because I'm Black, I am underqualified, but I should still have an opportunity. That's not what DEI means. And I think that we allow people to say those kinds of things. I sit on a panel. I talk to people in different spaces who come to the table believing that women are not as smart as men. You know, when you come to the table with that belief, you think that you're somehow giving someone a hand up, that they're not equally capable or qualified to have a seat at the table. And so when you operate like that, and when you believe that, I think that Donald Trump is probably the best example of being underqualified, but yet still having positions. And DEI guards against that and says that just because you're a white male does not mean that you are better than. And again, in fact, he proves, I would I would argue that he's probably the least qualified, the least competent president we've had in history.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something to be said about that. Well, and
Yeah.
you know, the fact that he viscerally, rejects DEI, that he speaks to the Civil Rights Act being harmful to white people. I guess it would be harmful to vastly underqualified white people.
That's the part he forgets to say.
He's like the hit dog hollering in that regard.
Yes. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's really what it's about. He's mad that some of his underqualified, incompetent friends have missed out on opportunities because other people who have been more qualified and better suited for jobs have been hired, and they're mad about it.
Yeah.
And so they want to get rid of every program. And so let me also mention this, because what I also do, I run a national education organization called Center for Strong Public Schools. And I watched how schools across this country, public schools, had to sign letters saying that they would not do DEI programs, and if they did, they would risk their federal funding. That's disgusting.
Yes.
And so the bullying, the force that has been enacted upon public institutions because they want to uphold incompetence is awful and wrong. And I can't wait until Donald Trump is out of office so that we can undo all of the harmful things that he has done to this country. And some of it will be irreparable, but there are things that we'll be able to fix as soon as he is out of office. And I cannot wait.
1 year down, 3 to go. We're with Alicia Thomas-Searcy, founder for the Center for Strong Public Schools, former Georgia State Representative, CEO of Morgan Enterprises. More of that conversation with Alicia when the Ron Show returns on Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast.
This is The Ron Show.
My guest today, Alicia Thomas-Searcy, former state representative for District 39 in the Georgia House of Representatives, CEO at Morgan Enterprises, founder of the Center for Strong Public Schools, frequent pundit on Fox 5 WAGA Television's weekend show, The Georgia Gang, which airs Sundays at 8:30 a.m. Yesterday on Fox 5's The Georgia Gang, you guys broached the conversation about Fulton County potentially having to shell out tens of millions of dollars to pay back attorney fees from the Trump 2020 election case. He, of course, has made noise about like $6.2 million. Actually, I want to replay that segment from The Georgia Gang. Melita Easter's on the dais, as well as Brian Robinson, Martha Zoller, and, of course, Alicia Thomas-Searcy. Lori Geary with the lead-in.
The fallout from the collapsed Georgia election interference case is really turning costly. Under a new state law, the Fulton County DA's office could be forced to pay nearly $17 million to Donald Trump and several co-defendants, reimbursing them for legal fees and other court costs after the case was dismissed. Martha, President Trump is asking for $6 million alone, and this is all because of that new law that was passed last legislative session.
Yeah, I mean, the case has collapsed. It didn't end up, impacting anything that happened. I think they ought to leave it alone as far as money's concerned, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Oh, no. Melita?
Well, you've got 5 of the defendants who are asking for more than $1 million in legal fees each. And then the figure for the president is $6 million. And, that's a lot of money for a case that never went to trial, never went in front of a jury. So I think the dissent in the judicial ruling was very interesting because it talked about the fact that, that this was a case that had been in front, for years that they had investigated. So they're asking to make a case in front of the judge against the legal fees. And so it'll be interesting to see what the judge decides about whether to give a hearing to the DA about the legal fees. And it'll be interesting to see if the legal fees go maybe to arbitration instead of just outright paying the amount asked for.
Brian.
There's often a penalty affixed to doing something that is wrong-headed. And this was wrong-headed from the very beginning. This prosecution should never have been brought. Why does it cost so much? Because these things cost a lot. Lawyers cost a lot of money. And this, as you said, stretched out of a period of years. So, of course, these costs are going to be really high. I do think that this will have a chilling effect on future political prosecutions in this state. And I also think, as I said last year when we passed it, that this is a genie in the bottle that is now out of the bottle, and the legislature needs to make sure that we're not going to have unintended consequences because these bills could get really high. The judiciary needs to be able to step in and create some kind of guardrails for the cost of taxpayers.
Alicia.
I think this is the best example I can think of in recent time of like politics and how the process is completely broken. Mm-hmm. You have people who have broken the law. They tried to overturn an election. Some of them pled guilty. And now somehow taxpayers are on the hook.
Allegedly. Because
they pled guilty.
Some of them did, but not all of them.
Right. But the ones who pled guilty, then there are others. All of them were involved in this. I read that very long indictment. It's troubling in a lot of ways. But the bottom line is my concern is the fact that we're putting taxpayers on the hook for paying these very expensive legal bills. And it's just not fair. It's unjust and it's unfair.
Well, I mean, that's why this case should never been brought in the first place. You know, you guys get sick of me making the point of they spend all the time and effort on this case instead of real criminal cases that were happening to citizens of Fulton County, like rapes and you know, assaults and that kind of stuff. You know, I think it should have never been brought. And you know, there were people of Fulton County that are hurt twice now.
Real quick, because I want to move on.
But there was an investigative grand jury followed by a grand jury which returned the indictments. So there are citizens of Fulton County who thought the case had merits.
Okay, Alicia, you sat on a panel. You were surrounded or flanked on both sides by conservatives. One of them, Martha Zoller, who bemoaned that she thought those cases never should have come to fruition. Actually, Brian did too. But as laughable as that is, given the facts that we know, it's sad that conservatives, instead of doing some self-reflection about how those cases wound up in a courtroom in the first place, I mean, going back to the big lie in January 6th, etc., instead of doing some self-reflection on how we got to that point, they look outward and go, well, this should have never been brought out to begin with, despite the fact that a grand jury of taxpayers and not Fonnie Willis or politicians brought this on the doorstep to begin with. But there again, we're dealing with a situation, I believe, where you've got a class of mostly white people who are going to get away with crimes committed. We saw the tapes. We've heard the audio, the calls, the Coffee County breach, et cetera, and so on. And that to me is just disheartening. That again, I think I like Martha. I actually do. I like Martha a lot. I don't find myself agreeing with her much, but I find her to be agreeably disagreeable. But that disheartens me, that it's so easy to just blithely say that should have never come to fruition when the Fulton County taxpayers are going to be on the hook for $17 to $18 to $20 million in legal fees that we didn't vote for. We didn't create those crimes. We didn't cause those crimes to be. And the people that did are going to get off scot-free at our expense.
Yes. And it's essentially what I said yesterday on the show. It's unjust and unfair. And we know that the whole purpose of them passing this law was just for this reason.
Yeah.
So that Donald Trump could recoup his legal fees. He probably hasn't paid those bills yet anyway.
No, I was going to say, right.
he's not known for paying his own bills, so I'm sure he's not paid those bills. And so those lawyers want to get paid for all of the work that they've done. Mm-hmm. And so you're right. It's really troubling to me. And it's baffling to me, too, because it's like they forget that crimes were committed. Mm-hmm. And that there was a group of people, by the way, not just in Georgia. I read that indictment. This was a coordinated effort across multiple states, purple states to be exact. This was a strategic effort that they sat down and had a plan in place. And Georgia happened to be the one because of the recorded calls. Mm-hmm. And I will give some of these Republicans some credit. They had the courage. We now have heard those tapes, too, of standing up to Donald Trump.
Yes.
And so it is amazing to me that you can break the law. And the Republicans keep saying, well, you know, if it was all because these charges should have never been brought and we need to focus on other things. No, a crime is a crime.
Right.
Whether it is a violent crime, whether it's a white collar crime, whether you're trying to overturn our democracy, those are crimes. They're all in the Constitution for a reason. And so everyone needs to be held accountable. You know, it goes back to our previous conversation about DEI. When you think you are above the law, when you think just because you are white or just because you are a Republican or just because you are associated with Donald Trump that you are above reproach, that's the problem. And it's sad to me that all of these people, as you said, will get off scot-free because of a law that was passed. Some would say because of an indiscretion of the DA. But whatever the reason, if you commit a crime, you need to be held accountable. And I just think it's grossly unfair that Fulton County taxpayers are now going to be footing the bill for this.
And can I just say, as a Fulton County taxpayer, if we wind up having to pay for that, I don't want that money going to Donald Trump. I want that going to his attorneys. Like that, if that's what it's supposed to pay, then it needs to go directly to them and not into his hands, because we know, as you mentioned, he ain't going to pay it. So
Nope.
At least make it go to the right people. We're with Alicia Thomas-Searcy, former state representative, CEO at Morgan Enterprises, and founder for the Center for Strong Public Schools. My last question, let's leave on a positive note here. I woke up today to seeing videos of Black Lives Matter activists going into a Minneapolis-St. Paul area church where it turns out someone who works for ICE is a minister. We talked about, you'd mentioned something about like being in a room and seeing only black women, that you realize you need to find some diversity. And I feel like who is it that said that like the most segregated hour in the American week is the hour we all go to church, right? I feel like that there's that lack of self-awareness that happens in a lot of churches for that realm. But I will say, seeing Black Lives Matter activists advocating on behalf of not just the death of a white woman, Renee Good, who was there speaking up for immigrants, but that Black Lives Matters activists and Renee Good types, or a cabal of white lesbians in Minneapolis are out there advocating for our Hispanic neighbors. Like, I see that coalition, and it just warms my heart. I think that's the vision of Dr. King that he was speaking about for so many years that is actually resonating with a lot of us.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that Dr. King was also a preacher,
yes,
right? And he believed in the Bible. I'm a Christian. I go to church, yes, to a black church. That's a different conversation, because I believe, the black church is a cultural experience
yes,
as well. Although we have a few white folks and they have a good time stopping and clapping right along with us. And
y'all got the best music, man. I'm telling you, it's the best music.
You ought to come and visit. And so but to your point, you're right. This is exactly Dr. King's dream. In the Bible, it talks about that as Christians, it's up to us to speak up for the least of these. And so if the least of these at the moment is a group of white lesbians, or if it's a group of Latinos or immigrants, if it's, a group of children, if it's, women who have been abused, whatever it is, I believe that God calls us to speak up, to stand in the gap. I believe that was the work of Dr. King. I believe that he wants us, regardless of what you look like, but as he says, to focus on the content of your character. The little black boys and little black girls and white girls and white boys can go to school together, that they can worship together. That was his dream. And so in this moment, on this holiday, it's up to us to live that dream in our households, in our churches, in our communities. We ought to be out serving in some capacity today. We ought to make sure that our voice is being heard and that we're standing up for those who, in many cases, aren't able to stand up for themselves.
Right.
And so I'm grateful for Black Lives Matter. I'm grateful for NAACP. I'm grateful for Anti-Defamation League. The list goes on of organizations who are working together to speak up, to stand up. ACLU. Yeah. A number of groups are out there, MALDIF, the list goes on, of very important work happening in Georgia and in this country, and we must continue to do so. We cannot allow people to silence us because of their ugliness and their hatred. If we're going to live the dream of Dr. King and do, I think, what we're called to do, I always like to, I go by Dr. Benjamin E. Mays' my favorite quote from Dr. Benjamin E. Mays is that every person is born into this world to do something distinctive and something unique. And if he or she doesn't do it, it'll never be done. So whether it's Dr. King or whether it's Alicia or Carlos, who's on our way to Swainsboro to speak to these young people, if we don't do it, it will never be done.
Absolutely. I love that. Listen, I appreciate your time on the road today. Enjoy the King holiday. You guys have a safe trip, and we'll have to catch up sometime. I'd love to meet you and Carlos as well and continue to have these conversations. Alicia Thomas-Searcy, former House Representative from the Georgia House of Representatives, CEO at Morgan Enterprises, and founder for the Center for Public Schools. I appreciate your time on The Ron Show today.
Thank you. Happy to be with you. Take care.
The Ron Show back after this on Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. Second hour of the Ron Show today. I'm going to give you a lot of audio from the King Day celebration at Ebenezer Baptist Church here in Atlanta, Georgia. You will hear from the governor and First Lady, Brian and Marty Kemp. You'll hear from Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock. I want to share with you first an opinion piece written by Amelia Robinson for the Columbus Dispatch. She was named the Columbus Dispatch Opinion and Community Engagement Editor just a few years ago. Now, for those of you who don't know, it was just days ago that Donald Trump made the proclamation that DEI and civil rights policies hurt white people. Amelia Robinson writing that to believe Trump's worldview, you'd have to, as many people do, close your eyes and lock your doors to the race-based injustice King, Dr. King, and so many others before and after him have worked against. She wrote, way back in December 2025, thousands of white people roasted J.D. Vance, the first Ohio resident to ever serve as U.S. vice president, on social media. Remember, she's writing for the Columbus Dispatch, so she's writing for that audience. So Amelia continues. At Turning Point USA's AmFest, Vance had declared,
in the United States of America, you don't have to apologize for being white anymore.
The prompt posted on Threads by writer and social media influencer Yashar Ali went like this. White folks on here, what are you doing with all the extra time you have now that you don't have to apologize for being white anymore? Look forward to the number of people who don't get this post. Amelia says, people got the assignment and the connection to Vance. There were nearly 9,000 sarcasm-laced responses to the post, which was viewed more than 800,000 times. Some of those responses she included being, I've been spending extra time gentle parenting my beautiful children, Riley, Kaylee, Early, Ugly, and William Robert Gregory III. Another said, look for a little kid who is running a lemonade stand without a permit, probably. Someone else chimes in, I've been pulling myself up by my bootstraps and having babies. Were the responses funny, Amelia asks? I laughed at several, she said. Is the situation we find ourselves in as a nation infuriating? It is more than enough to make you shake. The fact that our vice president made such a declaration about the supposed lifting of white oppression could be seen as a weird one-off. If not for the war on historical facts and current reality he and his boss have led against the American people. In supposed post-racial America, they spend a hell of a lot of time stoking racial tension and fostering oppression. Perhaps reminded that Martin Luther King Jr. Day was fast approaching, President Donald Trump, in a January 7th interview with the New York Times, said he believes civil rights era protections resulted in white people being very badly treated. The 1964 Civil Rights Act, Amelia writes, which was overwhelmingly approved by white lawmakers, was partly an attempt to provide black Americans with equal access to education and employment and dismantle segregation. According to our president, she writes, it accomplished some very wonderful things, but it also hurt a lot of people. The reality is that the law allowed room, far from an entire floor, for the people white people have almost always leapt over when America was supposedly so great. Amelia says, I concede that not having an automatic advantage could make some individuals feel bad, hurt, and not so great, but equality would flourish in a just world. If civil rights were extended to us all, no one would have automatic advantages based on skin color in the first place. To believe Trump's worldview, you'd have to, as many people do, close your eyes and lock your doors to the race-based injustices King and so many others before and after him have worked against. You'd have to truly, as many people do, believe we were better off when separate but very much unequal was the law of the land. You'd be okay with people being judged by the color of their skin, religion, gender, or ethnicity, as are the many who believe Ohio Somali American daycare owners are corrupt because Somali Americans in Minneapolis have been accused. Again, she's writing for an Ohio audience. Amelia Robinson continues, content of character isn't a hard concept. A crime committed by Irish American bar owners in Boston wouldn't lead to persecution of Irish American tavern owners in Ohio. The pursuit of equality has nothing to do with making white people cry, apologize, or grovel, she opines. It's about accepting the truth, finding solutions, and getting on with life in an America true to the Declaration of Independence, where she quotes, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is the freedoms, justice, and equality found in our Constitution and longed for in King's famed April 3rd, 1968, I've been to the mountaintop speech, the last before he was assassinated.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
Amelia Robinson continues, white folks reading this, whether you're nodding along to what I've written or cursing my name, don't you want to move beyond our past to something better? I know I do. I want to see King's promised land and not just from the mountaintop. No matter how the facts get distorted and reality twisted, you know the promised land I'm talking about. Don't know about Trump, but I suspect James David Vance of Middletown, Ohio, despite the division he sows in an attempt to retain power, knows it too. You might be surprised to know I agree with Vance to a point. White people don't have to apologize in America. America needs them to truly reject the lies and embrace the truth for the good of us all.
So just as I say, we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
So it is on this day, on the Dr. King holiday, just days after the sitting president of the United States made claims that the Civil Rights Act hurt white people. It's important to note, according to an article written in the USA Today, that USA Today data shows that black Americans are outnumbered 12-1 by white people in executive roles. At the same time, white men are making strides in the corporate boardroom, eroding gains made by women and people of color. Reams of empirical research shows that people of color in general and black people in particular are disadvantaged in labor markets when skills and qualifications are equally matched, said Victor Ray, an associate professor at the University of Iowa. Civil rights laws are a relatively minor intervention designed to fix state-sponsored discrimination and segregation, Ray said. From the time they were implemented, segregationists claimed these laws hurt white folks. Did you hear that? From the time they were implemented, he said, segregationists claimed these laws hurt white folks. It's shameful and false that the president is digging up a discredited segregationist talking point that most Americans would like to stay dead. It is important, by the way, to point out that on this day, a holiday that I don't believe Donald J. Trump wants us to continue celebrating beyond this year, nor does he want us to commemorate Juneteenth. That it is, as of putting this show together, it is just shy of 3 o'clock as I'm recording this segment, which you'll hear, obviously you're hearing, in the 4 o'clock hour, towards the end of the 4 o'clock hour. Don't do the time travel thing with me here. Just understand that I'm putting this together just shy of 3 o'clock. And it is just shy of 3 o'clock on the Martin Luther King Jr. Day holiday. And there is no official statement from President Donald John Trump commemorating the holiday. Not from the White House, not from his Truth Social account, nothing. If you think I'm reading more into this than there needs to be, I think you're wrong. I think they're wrong. I definitely think he's wrong. And I definitely think there's something wrong with him, too. And so it is, we continue to do as Dr. King commanded us shortly before he passed, to continue marching towards a more righteous, more equal nation, one that our founders granted us in writing, that we've yet to achieve that more perfect union. Hour number 1 in the books. I want to thank Alicia Thomas-Searcy for joining me for a poignant conversation. Hope to have her back on the show again real soon. Hour number 2, highlights from events at Ebenezer Baptist Church featuring the governor, the mayor of Atlanta, and Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock. This is The Ron Show.
From the heart of the city too busy to hate, a progressive voice making too much sense for corporate media's comfort. This is The Ron Show, where we the people come first. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hi, and thank you for listening. Whether it's on Georgia Now, weekdays 4 to 6 p.m., 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn, the replay, the rerun, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. weekdays on Georgia Now the following weekday. First hour, I got to spend a lot of time speaking with pundit, founder of the Center for Strong Public Schools, former state House representative member here in the state of Georgia, Alicia Thomas-Searcy, going over a whole host of things, honestly, really focusing on, here it is, the Dr. King holiday, and we're taking stock, temperature, I guess, of sorts, a little checkup on the Civil Rights Act, civil rights in general, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the political temperature with a second Trump presidency that is spiraling into the depths of unpopularity that obviously makes Donald Trump feel uncomfortable. His Republican colleagues have to as well, seeing generic polling data and efforts we saw over the weekend. Governor Spansberger sworn in Virginia, vowing to alter that state's map, while the Republicans are having some trouble doing the same outside of the state of Texas. Nonetheless, I wanted to spend this hour focusing a little bit on some of the events honoring Dr. King and his legacy from New Ebenezer Baptist Church here in Atlanta near the King Center in Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. I'll start first with the video message given by Governor Brian Kemp and First Lady Marty Kemp.
This is Governor Brian Kemp.
And I'm First Lady Marty Kemp.
On behalf of the state of Georgia, it is our honor to address you on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Each year, this occasion serves as a reminder of the incredible legacy that Dr. King left on our nation and world, and his commitment to peaceful civic engagement.
Dr. King's leadership changed the course of our nation's history, building a more just society, even in the face of violence.
We must never forget the work Dr. King and others did to confront injustice, and we can take this day to rededicate ourselves to making positive changes in our lives, communities, and nation.
Thank you for all you do to carry on Dr. King's legacy and mission as we keep working to promote liberty and justice for all through nonviolence.
God bless.
God bless.
The theme of that short message coming from Marty and Governor Brian Kemp, confronting injustice and to promote liberty and justice for all through nonviolence. As we spent the weekend, the last week, the last 2 weeks, the last few weeks looking at videos of people being dragged out of their vehicles, being maced, essentially, bear sprayed in the face by ICE agents. A woman shot 3 to 5 times. How many times did we find? 3 to 5 times Renee Good was shot and killed by an ICE agent. But yes, we have to confront injustice, and we have to work to promote liberty and justice for all through nonviolence. Mayor Andre Dickens also spoke today at New Ebenezer Baptist Church in person.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. All right. They only gave me 5 minutes, and y'all took 15 seconds of it. To Dr. Bernice King and the entire King family, to Reverend Raphael Warnock and our faith leaders that are here today, Reverend Rice, Reverend Sharp, and of course Shirley Caesar, to our elected officials. I see Reverend Warnock's partner and brother in the Senate, John Ossoff. We get behind you. for this re-election, our brother. To the rest of our federal delegation, I see so many of our House of Representatives members here and our local leaders and all the elected officials that are here and all of our honored guests and just everybody that's got a good conscience. Good morning. I always consider it a profound privilege to represent the people of Atlanta here each January as we pause to remember, to reflect, and to rededicate ourselves to Dr. King's dream. This year's theme, Mission Possible 2, Building Community, Uniting a Nation the Nonviolent Way, is quite appropriate for these times. So much has changed since I last stood before you at this service. This past year has brought a wave of uncertainty and hardship for families in Atlanta and across this country. We watch as citizens and long-standing residents across our country are snatched off the streets, out of their homes, and from their workplaces. We see tariffs being used as a weapon, not as tools of fair trade. And we watch as these tariffs get passed on to all of us and drive up costs for working families. I don't even eat breakfast no more. My budget can't afford breakfast. Atlanta families are feeling the pinch. Inflation means that things that we must have, like groceries, gas, rent, etc., cost more. And health care, of course, now costs way more. And paychecks just don't go so far. You know who gets hurt the most? The very people that Dr. King called us to defend. Now, we knew change was coming, but many were not prepared to be hit this hard, including those who actually voted for this foolishness to occur in the first place. Naive, ignorant, or indifferent, here we are. They believed the lies, and they covered their eyes and their ears, forgetful of our history. But people of faith must not be divided now. The enemy always looks to divide and conquer, but the Bible tells us that a house divided against itself cannot stand. Psalms 133:1 reflects on how good it is when the people of God live together in unity. Now is the time when we need to be united. Make no mistake, our unity does not require uniformity. Our strength lies in our diversity and differences. And nobody knows this better than Dr. Bernice King, the King Center, and the people of Atlanta. We are bound by a shared commitment to justice, dignity, and the well-being of our neighbors. And here in our city, this is how we will meet this moment. We are building community and uniting a city. And we're doing it block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. We made real and measurable progress in my first term. Violent crime is down, and our supply of affordable housing is up. Yeah. We made historic investments in our young people. Now youth crime is way down, while graduation rates and scholarships are at the highest level they've ever been in the city's history. We're on the way up. We added more parks and green spaces. We got a $17.50 minimum wage, and we got fresh food in places that were food deserts, and now a AAA credit rating. All together, we are moving Atlanta forward. But there is much work that remains to be done. We can walk right out of Ebenezer, and we can see some of our neighbors sleeping on the streets. There is someone watching right now that has more month than money. And we will still have too many families barely getting by, living paycheck to paycheck. 2 children growing up in just 1 or 2 miles away from each other can have a 20-year difference in life expectancy. Imagine that, where a zip code can determine your destiny. That can no longer be accepted in Atlanta or in America. That city has been named the best place in the country to live, the best place to start a business, and the best place to start a career over the last 2 years. But now, 2 weeks ago at my inauguration, I reminded the audience of how David brought 5 stones to face Goliath. And now this city is facing its own persistent enemies. Poverty and inequality are our Goliath. And we are going into battle with our own 5 smooth stones. Investing in our neighborhoods, especially the underserved and disinvested places, delivering more affordable housing, creating opportunities for our young people, continuing to prioritize the safety of our residents, and performing our duties while acting ethically and practicing sound fiscal responsibility. Thank you to our group project working in alignment. Our 5 stones are all high-yield investments that have paid substantial dividends. But just like David and with his Goliath, we will not rest until we have defeated our Goliath. The poverty and inequality that continues to plague parts of our city. That is how we intend to move Atlanta closer to Dr. King's dream of the beloved community. This is a mission made possible because we are no longer settling for business as usual. Dr. King said the time is always right to do what is right. Well, that time is now in the city of Atlanta. Dr. Bernice King, my sister, you are right. Mission possible. We can do this, and we will do this together. God bless you all. Amen.
Mayor Andre Dickens. Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock also addressed the assemblage at his home church, New Ebenezer Baptist Church. We'll get to that when the Ron Show returns on Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. We have more from the New Ebenezer Baptist Church setting where the Martin Luther King Day celebrations took place here in Atlanta. Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock addressing the audience.
Sisters and brothers, it is always my honor as senior pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church to welcome you to this ecumenical service. In days like these, I have been thinking a lot about something said to me by our great sage, whom we are blessed to have still with us, Reverend Congressman, Mayor, Ambassador Andrew Young. He's not here, but he's here. Ambassador Young said something to me that I've been thinking about a lot these days. He said that when they managed to pass the Civil Rights Bill into law, Martin Luther King Jr., Andy Young, and his lieutenants went to see Lyndon Baines Johnson. Helen, you know the story. And the president was elated, feeling very proud that he had managed to pass the civil rights law, and they were happy too. But Dr. King, being the no-nonsense kind of leader that he was, said, "Thank you very much. I need a voting rights law." He was always, Dr. Durley, mission-focused. Dr. King said, "We need voting rights right now, Mr. President." And the president kept saying in various ways, you're right, Dr. King, but I just don't have the power. I don't have the power to get that done right now. And they left the meeting. The staff was feeling all demoralized, feeling all dejected, and they began to say to Dr. King, "What are we going to do? The president says he doesn't have the power." Dr. King sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, if the president doesn't have the power, I guess we're going to have to go and find him some power." I like that story. Without position or pedigree, without political office, this Baptist preacher who knew in whom he believed the source of his strength and the strength of his life, said, we're going to go and get the president some power. And that's what Selma was all about. And so in these dark days, in these terrible times, I just came to remind you that power does not come from the top down, it comes from the bottom up. It's not about the people in power, it's about the power that's in the people. Are you ready? Are you ready? And so I'm going to work for you as hard as I can. That's what I've been doing. But you cannot outsource democracy. You cannot outsource transformation. And so in this moment, here's what they're trying to do. I don't have to go through all the policies. You know that you've witnessed the largest transfer of wealth from the bottom to the top in American history. They have militarized our streets. Here's what they are really trying to do. They are trying to weaponize despair and convince us that we are at war with one another. They're trying to weaponize despair and convince us that we are at war with one another. If they achieve that, if they manage to weaponize despair, they will convince us not to fight. And the only way to win is to fight. And if we fight, we will win. Because power doesn't come from the top down, it comes from the bottom up. You must set the context for the change that you want to see in the world. And so I'm inspired this morning by our neighbors, by ordinary citizens who are standing up in this moment in Minneapolis and all across the country. They're saying these streets do not belong to you. This is our democracy. Renee Good could have stayed in her house. But in the best of the civil rights struggle, she literally put her body on the line and she paid a high price for it. Now they're trying to malign her name, but you cannot bury good. Truth crushed to earth will rise again. And so stand up in this moment. Do not feel sorry for the immigrant communities as if this does not touch you. If they can show up in an apartment building and begin to zip tie children and separate children, if they can stop you and ask you to prove that you belong, all of us are imperiled. We are tied in a single garment of destiny, caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We must stand up in the best of the nonviolent tradition of the civil rights movement and remind those in power that this nation belongs not to those of us who have been elected, it belongs to the people. Are you ready? So I see what the Trump-Vance regime is up to. They're trying to divide us. He said that because of the civil rights movement, white people were treated very badly. It was a reverse discrimination. These were the words of the sitting president of the United States of America. Because those who have no vision, traffic in division, they don't know how to lead us, they're trying to divide us, the economy is bad, they're trying to distract us, we will not be fooled. And as they engage in the petty politics, we will not be discouraged. They closed the parks today to free admission on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Tore down the east wing of the White House in order to build a monument to himself. The truth is, the parks, the White House, the streets of this country, these things no more belong to him than that Nobel Peace Prize that somebody gave him the other day. They belong to the people. And real leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. don't seek recognition, they seek transformation. And so don't be discouraged, sisters and brothers. Every now and then when I feel discouraged, I'm reminded of what Martin said to his lieutenants. We got to get the president some power. And so when you see my parishioner, God bless his memory, John Lewis, and Hosea Williams crossing that bridge, they are answering the president's question. Brute force is on the other side of that bridge, and yet they kept on marching. Billy clubs under the color of law waiting to brutalize them to death, and yet they kept marching across that bridge. Who are we to give up? I'm so glad that John Lewis and Hosea Williams kept marching across that bridge. I'm glad that Amelia Boynton Gass on that bridge kept marching across that bridge. But not only did they walk across a bridge, they built a bridge, and a kid who grew up in public housing in Savannah, Georgia, walked across that bridge into the United States Senate. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Keep on marching. Keep on praying. Keep on working. Keep on struggling. Keep on protesting in nonviolence and with love, and we will win.
Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock today at New Ebenezer Baptist Church for the Martin Luther King Day commemorations. Second half of the show, I'm going to give you a speech that President Barack Obama gave in the absence of a presidential declaration of any sort when Barack Obama dedicated the Martin Luther King Memorial at the National Mall. We'll do that when the Ron Show returns on Georgia Now, Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast.
This is the Ron Show.
Weekdays 4 to 6 p.m. on Georgia Now, 8 to 10 a.m. the following weekday on Georgia Now as well, 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn. In these unique times, to put it kindly, it's nice to go back and listen to speeches from presidents when presidents were presidential. I want to go back to 2013 on this day, Martin Luther King Day holiday, to reminisce on the remarks given by President Barack Obama as he dedicated the Martin Luther King Memorial on the National Mall. This from late August 2013, and yet seems so forever ago.
An earthquake and a hurricane may have delayed this day, but this is a day that would not be denied. For this day, we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s return to the National Mall. In this place, he will stand for all time among monuments to those who fathered this nation and those who defended it. A black preacher, no official rank or title, who somehow gave voice to our deepest dreams and our most lasting ideals. A man who stirred our conscience and thereby helped make our union more perfect. Now, Dr. King would be the first to remind us that this memorial is not for him alone. The movement of which he was a part depended on an entire generation of leaders. Many are here today, and for their service and their sacrifice, we owe them our everlasting gratitude. This is a monument to your collective achievement. Some giants of the civil rights movement, like Rosa Parks and Dorothy Height, Benjamin Hooks, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, they've been taken from us these past few years. This monument attests to their strength and their courage. And while we miss them dearly, we know they rest in a better place. And finally, there are the multitudes of men and women whose names never appear in the history books. Those who marched and those who sang, those who sat in and those who stood firm, those who organized and those who mobilized, all those men and women who through countless acts of quiet heroism helped bring about changes few thought were even possible. By the thousands, said Dr. King. Faceless, anonymous, relentless young people, black and white, have taken our whole nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deep by the Founding Fathers in the formulation of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. To those men and women, to those foot soldiers for justice, know that this monument is yours as well. Nearly half a century has passed since that historic March on Washington, a day when thousands upon thousands gathered for jobs and for freedom. That is what our school children remember best when they think of Dr. King. His booming voice across this mall, calling on America to make freedom a reality for all of God's children. Prophesizing of a day when the jangling discord of our nation would be transformed into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. It is right that we honor that march, that we lift up Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, for without that shining moment, without Dr. King's glorious words, we might not have had the courage to come as far as we have. Because of that hopeful vision, because of Dr. King's moral imagination, barricades began to fall and bigotry began to fade. New doors of opportunity swung open for an entire generation. Yes, laws changed, but hearts and minds changed as well. Look at the faces here around you, and you see an America that is more fair and more free and more just than the one Dr. King addressed that day. We are right to savor that slow but certain progress. Progress that's expressed itself in a million ways, large and small, across this nation every single day, as people of all colors and creeds live together and work together and fight alongside one another and learn together and build together and love one another. So it is right for us to celebrate today Dr. King's dream and his vision of unity. And yet, it is also important on this day to remind ourselves that such progress did not come easily. That Dr. King's faith was hard-won. That it sprung out of a harsh reality and some bitter disappointments. It is right for us to celebrate Dr. King's marvelous oratory, but it is worth remembering that progress did not come from words alone. Progress was hard. Progress was purchased through enduring the smack of billy clubs and the blast of fire hoses. It was bought with days in jail cells and nights of bomb threats. For every victory during the height of the civil rights movement, there were setbacks and there were defeats. We forget now, but during his life, Dr. King wasn't always considered a unifying figure. Even after rising to prominence, even after winning the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. King was vilified by many, denounced as a rabble-rouser and an agitator, a communist and a radical. He was even attacked by his own people, by those he felt he was going too fast or those who felt he was going too slow, by those who felt he shouldn't meddle in issues like the Vietnam War or the rights of union workers. We know from his own testimony the doubts and the pain this caused him, and that the controversy that would swirl around his actions would last until the fateful day he died. I raise all this because nearly 50 years after the March on Washington, our work, Dr. King's work, is not yet complete. We gather here at a moment of great challenge and great change. In the first decade of this new century, we have been tested by war and by tragedy, by an economic crisis and its aftermath that has left millions out of work and poverty on the rise and millions more just struggling to get by. Indeed, even before this crisis struck, we had endured a decade of rising inequality and stagnant wages. In too many troubled neighborhoods across the country, the conditions of our poorest citizens appear little changed from what existed 50 years ago. Neighborhoods with underfunded schools and broken down slums, inadequate health care, constant violence, neighborhoods in which too many young people grow up with little hope and few prospects for the future. Our work is not done. And so on this day, in which we celebrate a man and a movement that did so much for this country, let us draw strength from those earlier struggles. First and foremost, let us remember that change has never been quick. Change has never been simple or without controversy. Change depends on persistence. Change requires determination. It took a full decade before the moral guidance of Brown versus Board of Education was translated into the enforcement measures of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, but those 10 long years did not lead Dr. King to give up. He kept on pushing. He kept on speaking. He kept on marching until change finally came. And then when, even after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act passed, African Americans still found themselves trapped in pockets of poverty across the country. Dr. King didn't say those laws were a failure. He didn't say this is too hard. He didn't say let's settle for what we got and go home. Instead, he said, let's take those victories and broaden our mission to achieve not just civil and political equality, but also economic justice. Let's fight for a living wage and better schools and jobs for all who are willing to work. In other words, when met with hardship, when confronting disappointment, Dr. King refused to accept what he called the isness of today. He kept pushing towards the oughtness of tomorrow. And so as we think about all the work that we must do, rebuilding an economy that can compete on a global stage, and fixing our schools so that every child, not just some, but every child gets a world-class education, and making sure that our healthcare system is affordable and accessible to all, and that our economic system is one in which everybody gets a fair shake and everybody does their fair share. Let us not be trapped by what is. We can't be discouraged by what is. We've got to keep pushing for what ought to be. The America we ought to leave to our children, mindful that the hardships we face are nothing compared to those Dr. King and his fellow marchers faced 50 years ago, and that if we maintain our faith in ourselves and in the possibilities of this nation, there is no challenge we cannot surmount. Just as we draw strength from Dr. King's struggles, so must we draw inspiration from his constant insistence on the oneness of man. The belief, in his words, that we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. It was that insistence, rooted in his Christian faith, that led him to tell a group of angry young protesters, I love you as I love my own children, even as one threw a rock that glanced off his neck. It was that insistence that belief that God resides in each of us, from the high to the low, in the oppressor and the oppressed. It convinced him that people and systems could change. It fortified his belief in nonviolence. It permitted him to place his faith in a government that had fallen short of its ideals. It led him to see his charge not only as freeing Black America from the shackles of discrimination, but also freeing many Americans from their own prejudices and freeing Americans of every color from the depredations of poverty. And so at this moment, when our politics appear so sharply polarized and faith in our institutions so greatly diminished, we need more than ever to take heed of Dr. King's teachings. He calls on us to stand in the other person's shoes, to see through their eyes, to understand their pain. He tells us that we have a duty to fight against poverty even if we are well off, to care about the child in the decrepit school even if our own children are doing fine, to show compassion toward the immigrant family with the knowledge that most of us are only a few generations removed from similar hardships. To say that we are bound together as one people and must constantly strive to see ourselves in one another is not to argue for a false unity that papers over our differences and ratifies an unjust status quo. As was true 50 years ago, as has been true throughout human history, those with power and privilege will often decry any call for change as divisive. They'll say any challenge to the existing arrangements are unwise and destabilizing. Dr. King understood that peace without justice was no peace at all. That aligning our reality with our ideals often requires the speaking of uncomfortable truths and the creative tension of nonviolent protest. But he also understood that to bring about true and lasting change, there must be the possibility of reconciliation. That any social movement has to channel this tension through the spirit of love and mutuality. If he were alive today, I believe he would remind us that the unemployed worker can rightly challenge the excesses of Wall Street without demonizing all who work there. That the businessman can enter tough negotiations with his company's union without vilifying the right to collectively bargain. He would want us to know we can argue fiercely about the proper size and role of government without questioning each other's love for this country, with the knowledge that in this democracy, government is no distant object, but is rather an expression of our common commitments to one another. He would call on us to assume the best in each other rather than the worst, and challenge one another in ways that ultimately heal rather than wound. In the end, that's what I hope my daughters take away from this monument. I want them to come away from here with a faith in what they can accomplish when they are determined and working for a righteous cause. I want them to come away from here with a faith in other people and a faith in a benevolent God. This sculpture, massive and iconic as it is, will remind them of Dr. King's strength, but to see him only as larger than life would do a disservice to what he taught us about ourselves. He would want them to know that he had setbacks, because they will have setbacks. He would want them to know that he had doubts, because they will have doubts. He would want them to know that he was flawed, because all of us have flaws. It is precisely because Dr. King was a man of flesh and blood and not a figure of stone that he inspires us so. His life, his story tells us that change can come if you don't give up. He would not give up no matter how long it took, because in the smallest hamlets and the darkest slums, he had witnessed the highest reaches of the human spirit. Because in those moments when the struggle seemed most hopeless, he had seen men and women and children conquer their fear. Because he had seen hills and mountains made low, and rough places made plain, and the crooked places made straight, and God make a way out of no way. And that is why we honor this man, because he had faith in us. And that is why he belongs on this mall, because he saw what we might become. That is why Dr. King was so quintessentially American, because for all the hardships we've endured, for all our sometimes tragic history, ours is a story of optimism and achievement and constant striving that is unique upon this earth. And that is why the rest of the world still looks to us to lead. This is a country where ordinary people find in their hearts the courage to do extraordinary things, the courage to stand up in the face of the fiercest resistance and despair and say, this is wrong and this is right. We will not settle for what the cynics tell us we have to accept, and we will reach again and again, no matter the odds, for what we know is possible. That is the conviction we must carry now in our hearts. As tough as times may be, I know we will overcome. I know there are better days ahead. I know this because of the man towering over us. I know this because all he and his generation endured. We are here today in a country that dedicated a monument to that legacy. And so with our eyes on the horizon and our faith squarely placed in one another, let us keep striving. Let us keep struggling. Let us keep climbing toward that promised land of a nation and a world that is more fair and more just and more equal for every single child of God. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Again, Barack Obama in August of 2013 at the dedication of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial on the Washington National Mall. And we stay vigilant now to ensure that there will not be a bust on the back end of that of one Donald John Trump, who likes to share memorials and monuments with other prominent names in American history. All right, only about 2 minutes or so to go. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not even upset that the White House nor the president made any proclamations or statements about the Martin Luther King Day holiday today. And I'll tell you why. Because I think this exposes a lot of the performative politickery that has been going on for decades, most notably from the Republican Party. I'm not going to absolve Democrats of being performative when it comes to statements and proclamations, et cetera, and so on, a.k.a. the virtue signaling. And a lot of business interests have done it as well. Listen, we make mockery of it, actually, in the LGBTQIA+, come July 1st. All those rainbow logos. In fact, they went away after Trump got reelected. It's way more subdued, and diversity, equity, inclusion all took a backseat. Performative, right? I call it out now. No, we now live in an era where the president doesn't even feign an interest in honoring Dr. King, doesn't feign interest from the vice president's Twitter X account or any other social media acumen for the vice president, the president, or the White House. It reminds me of Nancy Mace, who, by the way, is running for governor in South Carolina. She used to be that sort of Republican stalwart that actually would go on social media and wish a happy Pride Month to her constituents. And now she doesn't. Famously, she's anti-trans. Donald Trump used to tell us, oh, I love the blacks. The blacks love me. Oh, I love my Hispanic. None of that is true. And in this twilight, this victory lap of a presidency, the Make-A-Wish presidency, that we now live in, he's not even trying anymore. That's fine. That's fine. You know now the soul, not only of the man elected to serve in the White House, but largely of the base that adores him unflinchingly. And I prefer we know that. We know that now. So the work ahead for us is to coalesce those of us outside of that ugly bubble to pop that bubble. That is going to do it for The Ron Show. I want to thank you so much for listening. I want to thank Alicia Thomas-Searcy for joining me today. Fantastic conversation. We air 4 to 6 p.m. weekdays on Georgia Now, 8 to 10 a.m. the following morning on Georgia Now, the rerun. 11 p.m. Progressive Voices via TuneIn, or if you're listening via podcast, then you know we podcast it. Show notes, as always, at ronshowatl.com. Take care. We'll see you tomorrow.